putting fluoride in Wichita's water. Soon it will be your choice. But do you know how you'll vote? Do you know the facts? Expect Eyewitness News to cover both sides of the debate, with Fact Finder 12 investigator Michael Schwanke traveling to cities who fluoridate and others that are looking to stop putting fluoride in their water. Expect us to keep you informed. Fluoride, it's your choice. Fact Finder 12 investigations on air and online. Eyewitness News. Expect more. This is a Fact Finder 12 special report. Fluoride, it's your choice. From KWCH 12 Eyewitness News.
Why all of a sudden you want to fluoridate the water now? What's the big deal about fluoridation?
So if they could tell us that it wouldn't do anything long-term that was really awful to our families.
Let's like to see more information about it. Maybe there's still not enough out there.
Whether or not to put fluoride in Wichita's water is a question only Wichita voters can answer.
After decades of debate, fluoridating Wichita water goes to the voters.
Both sides have made their cases, and now it's your choice. In this Fact Finder 12 special report, we'll break down the debate, claims from both sides, and how other communities have handled the situation. We begin with the big question viewers have asked us. How does the process of adding fluoride to the water work?
And we found some answers in Topeka, a city that treats 30 million gallons of water a day with fluoride and has done it for decades. Fact Finder 12 investigator Michael Schwanke got rare access inside that city's water plant to show you their system and why Topeka has seen very little controversy around the program.
It's just kind of a routine for us. We've been doing it for so long.
Since 1957, fluoridation's been a part of life for people in Topeka.
Is there a lot of controversy around it here in Topeka?
In the 40 years that I've been here, there's very little controversy about adding fluoride to the drinking water.
Dentist Amy Thompson says the same thing, that in her practice, most of her patients either don't know about it or don't talk about it.
It's not something that you hear a lot about around here. I think everyone knows that Wichita is one of the few cities that doesn't have fluoride in their water. But here in Topeka, it's not something that we hear a lot about.
They connect. Of course, our guys are always here to
We got a rare tour inside the Topeka water plant, where plant manager Bruce Northrup started from where the fluoride is delivered by truck, stored inside these tanks, controlled by computerized calibration pumps, and eventually piped directly into the drinking water. A fairly simple process that we can show you again with this animation. Once delivered, the fluoride is held in two 4,000-gallon tanks filled about every 3 months. From there, it's piped to a calibration pump. The pumps make sure levels are kept at 0.7 parts per million. That's the recommended level from the CDC. From the pumps, it's piped directly to the water in its last stages of filtration, and then into homes and businesses.
The concentrated material is a whole lot different than when it's added to the water.
That's something we wanted to know more about, because you may have seen this warning on tanks and in anti-fluoride campaigns. Yes, in this form, it is dangerous.
The concentrated material is obviously pretty dangerous. It's a strong acid.
But Northrop points out, so is chlorine and other chemicals used to treat drinking water to make it safe.
As far as a work hazard, the fluoride is minor compared to the chlorine that we deal with on a daily basis.
But once those chemicals are diluted, again with fluoride, it's 0.7 parts per million, a large majority of doctors and dentists say it is safe. And at least in this town, debated very little.
It's just routine for us.
So how does it work here in Wichita? That's a question we got asked a lot also, and we went inside the city's water plant here for an answer. City Public Works officials say they're still trying to figure out how the system will be installed. But Public Works Director Alan King says his department does not want to spend money on the process until after he knows what voters want.
And Mike, from Kansas, you took a trip to the Southwest, an area that's become a real center of the fluoride controversy.
Yeah, and it's not the only one. There are a lot of cities around the nation dealing with it. We wanted to find an area, though, that is really on the forefront right now. Both Albuquerque and Santa Fe both having issues. And what makes them different than here in Wichita is they have fluoridated for decades, both of them since the 1950s.
Why now does Santa Fe's council want to get rid of it?
Well, it's interesting, and that's where we'll begin tonight is Santa Fe. The council there, again, after decades, all of a sudden decides it wants to stop fluoridating. We talked to folks on all sides of the story. Here's our trip to Santa Fe.
Santa Fe, New Mexico, a town that offers a unique way of living and prides itself on being different.
New Mexico has been, I think, historically kind of the Wild West where you do what you want.
You know, for controversies to happen in Santa Fe, it's not a new thing. It always happens.
People here say it's no surprise fluoride has become one of those controversies. The city has fluoridated since the 50s, but now the city council has voted to stop adding it.
You know, I don't understand what the problem is. We've had fluoride in our water for forever, as long as we've been here.
The council decided and already voted, but there were concerns about how open the process was, so now members will vote again. But most have made their decision, including Councilman Ron Trujillo.
Over the years, fluoride has been beneficial. You know, it's been beneficial for teeth. I do understand that, but I'm going to keep my stance that there's enough fluoride naturally occurring in our water system in this community that I don't feel that we need to add any more to it.
Not enough, according to CDC guidelines. Santa Fe and Wichita are similar when it comes to naturally occurring fluoride. Both cities have about half what's recommended. And just like Wichita, there are different opinions on the council.
And for me, the public health benefits outweigh those possible downsides, which really haven't been quantified, I don't believe.
Councilman Peter Ives is the only one who wants to keep fluoride.
The decision was an easy one for me. From my perspective, the people who suffer the greatest effect of not fluoridating would be, if you will, the most vulnerable.
Opinions in the community also vary. Some are concerned about health risk, but we heard this a lot too.
And having the choice to put it in your body or not.
Robin Laughlin says choice is a big deal here.
I think because we have a lot of healthy people here who look at things, who don't want to be told they have to have vaccinations, who moved here because we have a clean environment.
And reaction among dentists in Santa Fe?
Disappointment. I was a little surprised.
Dr. Chris Hendricks says not only was the medical community surprised, it's now trying to convince the council to change its mind.
As an adult, especially if you're affluent, you've had good dental care, this and that, you don't really think about it so much. It doesn't seem like it affects you.
Unlike Wichita, the fluoridation decision will not go to voters in Santa Fe. And if it comes to an end here, Councilman Ives says he wants one question answered.
I think the most important thing we can do if we stop fluoridating is to figure a way to measure the impact of that.
From Santa Fe, I headed to Albuquerque. The city there says it's just following new CDC guidelines, but now finds itself in the middle of a national controversy.
Albuquerque, New Mexico. Spectacular views, a booming tourism industry, and a debate over fluoride.
It can become a very contentious issue, very emotional issue, but we're just trying to follow the science and the recommendation of EPA and CDC.
I believe there's a lot of misinformation and I call it superstition, junk science.
For decades, fluoride wasn't even talked about in Albuquerque. Like many other U.S. cities, it was part of life, added to the drinking water since the 1950s.
I think it's great.
But new CDC guidelines led city and county leaders to make the decision to stop.
And as it turns out, our naturally occurring level of fluoride here is right at what the CDC interim recommendations are.
That naturally occurring level is 0.7 parts per million. That's what the CDC now recommends. It used to recommend up to 1.2 parts per million. So how does this relate to Wichita? We do have naturally occurring fluoride, but it doesn't meet CDC recommendations. We have 0.3 parts per million.
Right, we didn't look at fluoride and say, oh, that's bad, and we need to stop that because we've been doing the wrong thing all these years.
But a decision that didn't seem to create much controversy among people who live here pushed Albuquerque into a national debate.
What I've seen is we've had activists sort of on both sides pointing at us and calling us, saying, well, here's an example of a community that stopped fluoridating.
Anti-fluoride groups used Albuquerque as an example, and headlines like this, calling it a major health victory, could be found all over the internet.
Anytime that this comes up before the public in the media, you're going to have a certain group of people who are very vocal about it. And I can't explain that. I think that's going to continue.
Dentists such as Dr. Paul Dunn, who serves the underserved in New Mexico, have paid close attention.
But I do hope that they're sure that nobody is really getting shorted on the fluoride. Poor folks, who are not even aware of this, but they tend to suffer most from these decisions that we make.
He's okay with the decision to stop fluoridating as long as levels remain where the CDC wants them. And as the debate moves forward, that people here don't become distracted.
What we really have to be careful of is that we stick to the science.
So, Michael, did cost enter into the decision for either of these cities?
There is a cost for both cities, but I asked both of them that question. They said cost not at all a factor. And we should point out, too, that those are, again, only 2 cities. A lot of cities dealing with this right now. Portland, for example, right now, their council just voted to start fluoridating, kind of in the same position we're in right now. You heard in those stories, we're referring a lot to the parts per million, and we've had some viewer questions about what does that mean. Well, coming up later in the show, we will demonstrate exactly what that means, what 0.7 parts per million really is.
All right, Michael. According to the Centers for Disease Control, more than 65% of Kansans receive fluoridated water. For some communities, fluoride naturally occurs at levels that can prevent cavities. Those include Goodland, Colby, and Dodge City. But that's not the case for everyone. So, for years, places like Hayes, Salina, and Topeka have added fluoride to city water supplies. The Centers for Disease Control lists fluoride levels for every water system in the country. We put a link at kwch.com.
A coalition of Wichita dentists and doctors forced the issue this year with a petition to the Wichita City Council. The decision council members faced: either fluoridate or put it to a vote.
The council chose the latter, and since then, the coalition has faced several opposing groups. Eyewitness News reporter Ann Meyer talks with campaigns from both sides of the fluoride debate.
When we see someone who comes into our practice who doesn't have any fillings and is in their early 20s, early 30s, we can almost guess that they're not from Wichita.
Dr. Sarah Meng believes the dental health of the city would improve with water fluoridation. That's why she's joined hundreds of Kansas doctors and dentists to form the group Wichitans for Healthy Teeth.
What I want people from Wichita to know is that that doesn't have to be the norm. A low decay rate, few fillings, or no fillings is possible. We dedicate our lives to teaching people how to do that, and this is the one piece of the puzzle that we're missing.
Ming says numerous scientific studies show the benefits of fluoride, and reputable health organizations support fluoridation. She's hoping Wichita voters agree and vote yes November 6th.
I think we've awoken the silent majority, and I think that's going to help us overcome the vocal minority.
Those vocal voices come from at least 3 groups in Wichita fighting against fluoridation.
In terms of why I oppose it, the number one issue is the freedom of choice.
Don Landis is with Wichitans opposed to fluoridation and has also worked with Fluoride-Free Kansas.
We coordinate and cooperate wherever possible, but we also have things that we do separately.
Opponents like Landis question the benefits of fluoride.
Fluoridation is an arrogant practice, and I define arrogance as ignorance backed up with overconfidence. The most famous cities in the world are not fluoridating their water, and Wichita should keep in that league.
Landis believes Wichitans will vote his way, just like they've done several times before.
We've studied it. 1964, we said no. 1978, we said no. The mayor and city council have said no different times throughout the 80s and the 90s. It's come up, and it always results in the same thing.
Both sides agree on one thing. They want a lot of voters to cast their ballot on this issue, so it shows what people want. Ann Meyer, KWCH 12, Eyewitness News.
You've seen the mailers, brochures, and ads, but how true are their claims? Fact Finder 12 checks the truth on both sides' campaigns coming up.
Plus, purified, deionized, but do they have fluoride? We'll show you how to know what's really in your bottled water. Plus, just how much it will cost the city of Wichita to fluoridate. That's next on our Fact Finder 12 special, Fluoride, It's Your Choice.
Welcome back to our Fact Finder 12 special report, Fluoride, It's Your Choice. Voters decide November 6th whether to add fluoride to Wichita's water.
Both sides of the fluoride debate have been working to get their voice heard. That's meant yard signs, mailers, pamphlets, and advertisements. They all make a lot of claims, but who is telling the truth? Fact Finder 12 investigator Brian Heap looks for the facts.
Both sides have flyers such as these around town. The No on Fluoride campaign says the ADA has recommended pregnant mothers and infants not drink formula made with fluoridated water. The statement cites the American Dental Association, but does so inaccurately. So we're going to label this claim as false. The ADA's website actually states it is safe to use fluoridated water to mix infant formula, but it also warns of a chance for fluorosis, harmless white spots on your teeth. This pro-fluoride flyer doesn't mention the yearly cost to taxpayers, choosing instead to say the cost is offset by the savings on dental care. It says fluoridating Wichita's drinking water would save $4.5 million each year. Now, to reach this figure, the Pew Center looked at the total cost of treating tooth problems for Wichitans who were covered by the 3 largest insurers in town, including Medicaid. In 2011, that total was $18 million. The Pew Center then used a 25% reduction in tooth decay, and they based that number on what other communities have experienced. So 25% of $18 million equals $4.5 million. The math is true if you assume that 25% reduction in tooth decay. All right, how about this one? Studies have shown evidence of harm to human health at levels as low as 1 part per million. This is true, but we also find it to be misleading. The study does say that, but the pamphlet doesn't tell you the recommended fluoride level in Wichita will be 30% lower at 0.7 parts per million. And finally, scientific studies show drinking fluoridated water can lower a person's IQ. A Harvard study looked at groundwater in China with high concentrations of naturally occurring fluoride. We talked with one of the researchers who says the levels in China are much higher than what's typically found in the United States. That's why we find this to be misleading. However, Anna Choi told us that doesn't necessarily mean fluoride is risk-free. You can find the same studies that we fact-check and fact-check them for yourself by going to kwch.com. Brian Heap, Fact Finder 12, Investigators.
Brian mentioned the cost to Wichita taxpayers. Fact Finder 12 breaks down the numbers. The cost to get the system started is estimated at more than $2 million. That covers building improvements and equipment to the water treatment plant. Operation and maintenance would total more than $570,000 a year. Local and private organizations could help cut down these costs. Potential grants could also be available.
Many people drink bottled water every day, and depending on where it comes from, it could contain fluoride. Water labeled as deionized, purified, or distilled likely has no or only trace amounts of fluoride. Other products could have fluoride that is either added or naturally present in the water source. The FDA regulates how much fluoride is in bottled water, anywhere from 0.8 to 2.4 parts per million, depending on whether it's naturally occurring or added. While the FDA does not require producers to label the amount of fluoride in the water, it does require that fluoride additives be listed. He came from a community with fluoride to a community without, what a local doctor says he's seen in the ER.
The Wichita medical community has voiced its support of fluoridating Wichita's water.
A group of more than 500 dentists and doctors signed a petition to get the issue on the ballot. One of those includes a longtime Via Christi ER doctor who says he's seen the effects from lack of fluoride in the community.
Dr. Robert Stengel sees all kinds of patients in the Via Christi ER.
It turns out, if you look at the Via Christi hospitals here in Wichita, that over the last year, basically, we saw over 3,000 cases of primarily dental-related complaints.
Much of his career has been here in Wichita, but before that, he was in Kansas City, where water is fluoridated.
There I saw much, much fewer of the type of patients that I'm seeing here. And I think a large proportion of that may be due to the fact that we simply don't have fluoridation here.
While he's quick to not blame everything on lack of fluoridation, he thinks it would provide great benefits here.
The problem is, if you go to the internet, you can find anything you want. And what happens is you get a small percentage of people with very loud voices, people who will tell you that fluoride causes cancer, that it causes problems with intelligence, that it causes kidney disease. And those things are completely unfounded.
Dr. Stangl is not alone. Most of his colleagues agree and, like him, are willing to come out and support it.
Anyone who really looks at it and really looks at this objectively would have a hard time coming up with anything that says that this is not a great idea.
Several compounds can be added to water for fluoridation.
Wichita State University chemist David Eichhorn says despite what they start out as, once any are mixed with water, you end up with fluoride. He says groups like the CDC have determined safe levels. But like anything, he says you don't want too much.
Any chemical is going to be toxic at a high enough concentration. I mean, a good example is sodium, which, of course, we think of as something that we need to stay away from, right? That we have all these people telling us we need to stay away from sodium. Sodium is, in fact, a very important element for us to have in our bodies, just not at too high a concentration.
We also talked with chemist and former KU professor Albert Bergstahler. While many health organizations endorse fluoride, Bergstahler says he drank 5 to 6 quarts of fluoridated water daily and got sick.
I know for a fact, it was verified within me, that I had a low thyroid function that was reversed by getting away from fluoridated water.
The Centers for Disease Control says the most common side effect from higher than recommended fluoride intake in the U.S. is dental fluorosis. It causes spots, streaks, or in the worst cases, pits in tooth enamel. It happens when teeth are forming, so it only affects children 8 and younger. For parents in communities with fluoride levels over 2 parts per million, the CDC recommends finding an alternate drinking water source for children under 8. For most Americans, the CDC says if you follow guidelines for your child's toothbrushing, then the danger is minimal.
So just how much is 0.7 parts per million?
Michael Schwenke joins us again for a demonstration next.
Welcome back to our Fact Finder 12 special report, Fluoride, It's Your Choice. To prevent tooth decay, the CDC recommends 0.7 milligrams of fluoride for every liter of water.
So just how much is that? We go back to Fact Finder 12 investigator Michael Schwenke for a demonstration.
You've heard throughout this program, we've talked a lot about parts per million, and that's not something a lot of us talk about, so we wanted a good way to visualize it. Again, the CDC right now is recommending 0.7 parts per million of fluoride. Wichita right now has 0.3 parts per million. So we took the question back to WSU and Professor David Eichhorn and asked him, how can we show people what 0.7 parts per million really looks like? So we have this aquarium. It's filled with 15 gallons of water, and Eichhorn says here's a good way to show people. It'd be the equivalent of 1 drop of fluoride, this is food coloring, 1 drop in the 15 gallons. Not much more to it than that. You saw in Topeka, it's really just the pure fluoride. It goes into a calibration pump to pump out that 0.7 parts per million and then directly into the water. Roger and Cindy?
While both sides have given their opinions, the final decision falls to voters.
Wichitans will make their voices heard November 6th. Eyewitness News will have complete Campaign 2012 coverage with results throughout the night on air and online. That's November 6th. Thanks for watching our Fact Finder 12 special report, Fluoride, It's Your Choice.